All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this deep dive conversation with Cave Day. We're joined by the wonderful Tina Roth Eisenberg. If you're here or you're watching, I'm sure you already know who she is. She's the founder of Creative Mornings. She's the blogger at swissmiss.com. She's the founder of Tattly and To Do. And Friends work here in Brooklyn. I think it's just called Friends. In Brooklyn, it's a co-working space. But it's such an honor and a privilege to be joined by Tina Roth Eisenberg. Welcome. Thanks for being here with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is fun.
Yeah, so we're starting to do more outside the cave events to inspire the people that work together, to bring community together, which I know that is important to you.
Yes.
So we start every cave with a similar question. We ask, your name and location, what are you working on today? And what are you leaving out is a typical question. So if this is what we're working on today, we're here to just have this conversation for the next hour or so. What are you leaving out? Like what's sort of on your mind, but you don't want to bring with you and you want to just name it?
Oh, the gazillion emails that I should have been responding to over the past few days in my inbox. I'm totally not taking them with me.
Sure, good. Another email delinquent in the room.
Mhm.
Great. So I want to start with a quick warm up. We're going to do 20 questions that should have about one-word answers. Can we do these quick questions? All right.
Yep.
So let's go quick and then we'll get into the meat of it. So first question, what's your zodiac sign and do you care?
I'm a Capricorn, and yes.
What time do you wake up?
Around 5:30.
Oof. Go-to pastry.
Lemon scone.
What's your coffee order?
Black.
What's the app you use most on your phone?
Instagram and Google Maps.
The website you visit the most?
YouTube.
What's your talent show talent?
Storytelling.
You have a desired superpower?
Teleportation.
When and where was your last flight to?
Switzerland in September, and I went there to see my dad pass away, and I made it by 30 minutes.
Wow. Speaking of storytelling, are you more likely to treat yourself after a big win or after a bad day? And what's your treat?
Unfortunately, I'm better with the treats on a bad day, and I'm not good about the wins, and it's usually something sweet.
Okay, no judgment, no fortunately or unfortunately. You are, and that's great. 11, what was your first paying job?
I grew up in Switzerland selling cheese toast at a farmer fair.
That's amazing. What was your worst job? And it could be the same one.
Selling cheese toast at a farmer fair.
Great. What do you think your most used emoji is?
Red heart.
4, what's your current favorite Tattly design?
The 3 acorns by Lara Cole Gastinger.
Okay, we'll have to post that in the link afterwards. What distracts you the most when you're working? Just broadly the internet. 16, a hobby that you love doing, but you would never want to get paid for it or do it professionally.
Walking dogs.
Oh, that's a great one. Yeah, you have a new dog. 17, Kindle, paper, or audio?
Audio.
One thing you've started doing recently that you wish you would have started earlier?
Adopting a rescue.
19 is, do you have a trend that you have no desire to get into?
NFTs.
And last question for this warm up, one thing you're looking forward to this weekend?
Cooking with my kids.
Great. Thanks. You feel warmed up?
Yeah, this is great. I like this.
Okay. All right. Tina and I were talking a few minutes before everyone got here, and she was very self-deprecating in a way that felt very relatable. She said you said recently you had one of the worst weeks in a long time. And
it was last week. You're being very kind to cover it up. It was last week.
Okay, so last week was the worst week you've had in 6 years. Is that what you said?
Professionally, yes.
Yeah. And with whatever detail you're willing to share, one of my questions is like, you seem so optimistic, you seem so effusive and bubbly. And I was going to ask if you ever have bad days. So this is a good answer to that question.
Yes,
But
I do.
I'm curious, the things that stress you out. Is it pleasing people? Is it money related? Is it just trying to make everything work? Is it, I mean,
it's like a mix of a lot of things, right? Money is definitely a trigger for me. I'm definitely someone who, like if you look at my career, I love creating, building systems, building something new from nothing. And that's where my happy place is. And usually it involves community and getting people together. And I'm not the person that starts out with the business model and the business plan. I'm sort of going where the joy is and where it feels good. And, so oftentimes my businesses are successful in terms of reach or how they make people feel, but they're not necessarily super successful when it comes to the business model itself. So money is definitely something that I oftentimes think about, and that's kind of a bit of a trigger with me. But like with anyone else, like there's just sometimes hard moments when it comes to work. Either you have really good people leave and you have to replace them, and it's just like the big transitions in life, they also translate to work.
Yeah.
And last week was just a hard one.
Yeah.
Okay. On multiple levels.
Well, thanks for sharing and being willing to even share that much. You said something that I wrote down earlier on, which was that, and then you look at your Instagram and it's all fake.
Well, yeah, I had a moment, I can be totally transparent. Like two days ago, I kind of I'm not a crier. Like I'm a very emotional person. I feel a lot of things. I feel like we need to live a life with lots of feelings, but I don't cry very easily. And 2 days ago, I kind of popped. Like the pressure was too much, and I kind of popped. And I called with a friend, and I called her knowing it might happen. And she's like my grounding friend and knows me well, and it was business related. And the amazing thing was that I felt so great after. It was like this release. And my kids were upstairs, and they're almost 16 and 12. And I told them, like, we sat down for dinner, I was like, guys, I just cried. And it was so great. And my 12-year-old was so confused. He's like, are you okay? I was like, no, it was so good. And then we had like a dinner conversation over how cries can be such a good release.
Yeah.
And in the end of the day, we turned it into something really positive. And yeah.
Seems like you're good at that.
If you haven't had a good cry recently, I highly recommend it.
Yeah. Well, I guess on a related topic, it seems like I only know some of the people that you surround yourself with. That obviously community is important to you, but that the people you surround yourself with are really important and hold a lot of weight, and obviously the time in your life. So I'm curious a little bit more about how you find your people. How do you choose who to hire? How do you recruit them? How do you make sure that you are surrounding yourself with good people?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm a very intuitively driven person. So I'm, first of all, very lucky in that I've run organizations, especially at Creative Mornings, that is so purpose driven that oftentimes people find me. It's like, I'm a big believer in resonance, that if you create, like everything you create has a certain vibration. And it's just a matter of finding the people that resonate with it. And I feel like something like Creative Mornings that has such an extreme, like it is a very purpose-driven organization. So it has a very clear sort of energy pattern to me. And like the people that get attracted to it, they sort of show up with their eyes wide open. I was like, I want to contribute. So it's oftentimes sort of like, it's just a sensing into who really gets what we're after, who gets the purpose of this, who's really values driven. And then the way I hire is like, I've had to learn one thing, and this is over years of me trying to be, when I started hiring people, I remember I read all these business books, because I wanted to be a super pro boss lady. And all these business books talked about things that were just, they weren't important to me. I mean, yes, of course you have to have systems and whatever, but I was like, where's the fun? Where's the play? Where's the love? Where's the kindness? Sort of the things that I deemed really important in running a business, but they're not really covered in business books. So I was actually, for years, I was very confused as in, is what I deem important not important? I felt like I was kind of like a I didn't really dare to talk about my approach that is very love and kindness
Yeah.
driven when it comes to work. I thought I was just like, inexperienced woman trying to run a business. But then I started realizing, and this is actually an interesting story. I went to Jason Fried's workshop. This is how we work. Jason Fried runs
Basecamp.
Basecamp, a very,
Yeah.
successful tech company. And I admire him as a very smart man. And I saw him tweet that they're doing this workshop. This is years ago. And I booked a flight and I said, I'm going. And he tweeted at me afterwards, like, hey, are you really coming to this? I'm like, yeah, I am. I want to see how you work, how you run your company. And so, these are two tech guys, super introverted men who started a company that basically allows you to do asynchronous work, which is for a dream for introverts, right?
Right.
So at this, like, maybe 100 people there at this workshop. First of all, I was the person like welcoming everyone because nobody was there. I got into like host mode, which was really funny. And then they were talking about how, and it's super interesting. They told us how they work, but the big moment was where I almost snorted the coffee out my nose was, he said, well, here in the office, if you do come in, if you were to go up to someone and interrupt them, that's considered a bother. So you have to think really long and hard if it's worth going up to someone and interrupting them for whatever you need. And I was just like, oh my God, Jason would die if he worked with me. Because I mean, my offices are warm and bubbly and kind of a little outgoing and a little loud, but they're just really, they're fun.
Yeah.
And so I realized in that moment that you really have to be super aware of what the environment is that you have created, and then you have to hire appropriately for it.
Yeah. And I'm assuming that in your years of business that you've made mistakes, like hiring the wrong people. That's sort of a poke for stories, but we can move on. How so it seems like you're a natural gatherer, an extrovert, and the pandemic has obviously been affecting all of us. I want to start on a positive because I think the conversation is going to go a little bit more real and that we're all struggling a little bit. But I'm curious, from your perspective, what do you think we've gained from the pandemic so far? Or you can speak personally.
I think we gained a lot from the pandemic. I mean, for me personally, I think I've gained a lot of clarity around what is important to me, what is not important, what was able to fall off. So I think we're going to look back at this time as sort of a big awakening and a big sort of like recentering, reshifting, and I want to acknowledge this comes from a place of privilege, and
Sure.
and a lot of people have it really, really hard. So I'm fully acknowledging that I'm privileged here. I'm not hungry. I'm not worried about my apartment,
Yeah.
But I personally must say, like, I was in such a machine of like busy, hustle, that I think sort of that forced pause that we were all forced to do. I mean, is anyone raise of hands? Did anyone have like some unexpected clarity around what's important for you? Because to me, it was, anyone raise of hands who had some clarity? A few of you, yeah. So I think like we're gonna look back and it's so hard. I feel like there's so many layers right now of like fears that we had around COVID and like all the stuff that's going on in the world. But still, I think that's actually what we're going through right now. I sort of have a hunch that this time we're in is actually teaching us how to be centered and calm within a storm. Because I don't think it's gonna get calmer anytime soon. We just have to really learn how to navigate these times in a really centered and calm way.
Can I ask if your kids would say the same thing? Do you think that they would think that there's something meaningful to be gained over the last 2 years? I don't know your kids at all, but
I will ask them this over dinner tomorrow. But it's interesting. I'm really, really lucky. I have a really good relationship with my kids, which I don't take for granted at all. And they really like each other too. So the three of us really love spending time together, which I think is the biggest gift in the whole world. And and they have an amazing dad that I co-parent with. So when I realized what was happening with the lockdown, you know, and America, the summer breaks are so incredibly long. I was like, this is just insane. I went super proactive in how can I make sure we still have a good summer. And we sort of planned with their dad sort of this week on, week off, and like we made sure that we maybe rent a house upstate so I could work and they could have a good time. So we actually literally were able to create sort of a good time. Like we were able, no matter how hard it was, to create a good time. And they said recently, they said, you know, looking back, we had a really nice summer. We had 2 really nice summers. I mean, we're talking lockdown, okay? This is not what a kid would say, we have a nice summer, like you can't really see your friends or whatever. But somehow we managed to create an energy that was still calm and we had fun together. I don't know if this answers your question, but I'm actually really hopeful that my kids are going to look back and not fully traumatized, but almost that they're going to be able to say like, hey, we had a good time with mom and dad at least.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really special experience, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, much harder for you. I feel for you because you have little ones where you can't really articulate these things with, right?
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, the 3-year-old sort of doesn't know any different. She went to school for the first time wearing a mask, and this is just her experience of school. And obviously the 9-month-old has no idea. I mean, he doesn't see anyone really. Like we actually just made a joke last week that he's never been held by a non-family member. Oh. You know, you'd give him to a friend of the family, or I mean, a stranger on an airplane. I don't know, like who holds your baby, but he's only been held by like 8 people in his whole life. Oh. So hopefully that'll change soon. I want to transition a little bit into, you know, this is Caved In. We think a lot about our relationship to work. And so we'll transition with a question about your kids and your work, which is, I think all of us, everyone in the room, everyone in the world, we learn something about work before we ever step into an office, before we ever get a paycheck. And we learn from our parents, essentially, like, what does it mean to work? What does hard work mean? What does a work ethic feel like? I'm curious, you know, I don't really know your day to day, and if you're working from the space or on calls all day, or what do you think your kids observe from you, and what do you think what do you hope they learn that work means?
I love this question. So I'm talking about pre-pandemic right now. Oh, hello, my cat has joined the call. Pre-pandemic, I have a really lovely office, and it's a really lovely space, and there's swings and there's confetti drawers and it's fun, and there's props, there's Viking hats, and there's like fun things, and you can draw on white walls. Like, I purposely have created a very cozy, beautiful office, and my kids loved coming to it. And to me, that was always like one of the best things, that my kids and their school was just 2 blocks away. So they were constantly there. They always wanted to stop by. You know, there were moments where my son would like teach the floss to our chief community officer, like just these little glimpses of like the children in my, and you know, as a kid, you absorb like an energy in a space. And I've always jokingly said to them, like, this is not a regular office. Just don't think that this is normal. Yeah. And I remember I used to go on weekly dinner dates with my daughter when she was about 8. And it was one of those days where somebody asked me what I do, and I just couldn't, like, in an elevator pitch in 1 sentence say this because it's just too complicated. And I fumbled again. So that night over dinner with my daughter in this restaurant, I said, do you know what I do at work all day? Because I figured an 8-year-old might say it in a way that's really easy. So I asked her, do you know what I do at work all day? And she, without flinching, said, yeah, you sit at your computer and you laugh. Serious. And I wanted to get up and run through the restaurant and go, oh my God, this is amazing. This is her perception of me at work. And I figured, like, my job is done. Because if that's what yeah, it was just such a lovely moment. And, you know, the interesting thing about the pandemic is that now they see me, they hear our conversations. And my daughter is super perceptive. You know, they walk in and out, they go to the bathroom, and oftentimes, sometimes they say, like, Mom, this energy was really interesting on this call. Like, they're picking up like work calls when do you do that? Like back in the days when I was a kid, I didn't hear my parents
Right.
at work. I didn't hear their work persona,
Yeah.
but they do. So I'm actually really excited that they're getting a bit of a glimpse of just, I mean, I'm really lucky because I'm surrounded by such kind and generous people, and the way we interact with other, I think, is on a very personal and friendly and also fun level. So I hope that they will take away to never be mistreated by someone, to not,
Yeah. To
to
laugh at
set
their
boundaries.
computer.
Yeah. What was that?
Sit at, to sit at their computer and laugh.
There we go.
Yeah, that's great. I'm curious. A couple of years ago, I went to a book signing with Austin Kleon, and when my daughter was very young, and you sort of said the same thing that he said, which is, I asked him. I said, "Look, you're always writing about how your kids inspire your work and how the process that they have in their doodles inspire you to write a blog post about creative process." I said, "When does that start happening? I have a 6-month-old at home." And I won't forget this phrase. He said, "You're in the shit for probably 2 more years, at
Yeah.
least." I'm curious how your kids interact with your work. Do you get inspired by them? Obviously, there's I know from your own history that when your daughter was born, you stopped taking on clients, and she also inspired Tatley to
Yep.
some degree. I'm curious about the integration of your kids into your work, or separation, if there are things that you're like, we don't, this business is a business, not for kids or whatever.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's I think my story is a little weird, and I don't think I would do it again the way I did it. But I started my design studio the day my daughter was born. I started a co-working space because I had to leave, like I couldn't be at home anymore because my daughter was so clingy, and work from the bedroom. It was also inspired by her. Like started the first co-working space in Brooklyn when she was 2. I started Tatley inspired by my daughter, bringing home these shitty temporary tattoos. And I was like, I just can't. But Tatley was a joke and turned into a business. That was also inspired by her. And that was when my son was 1. Like I started all these businesses when my kids, and I started Creative Mornings, which is also was not intended to be a business, when my daughter was 2 as well. So I started everything like in the thick of it.
Yeah. In the shit. Yeah.
In the shit. Yeah. So, but I think for me, if I'm really honest, I was not thriving as a mom of babies and toddlers. That was not my proudest moment. And I almost wonder if it was a bit of I love you and I love being a mom, but I really, really also love doing other things. So
Yeah.
maybe it was a bit of an escape, and I was such a workaholic back then. So I don't know.
Do you feel like you have to, I don't know how to put this other than like choose one identity over the other, like being a mom, being a parent, being a business owner?
No, I don't buy that. I think I have always, like, I started so many things, but I was in control of my time. So I wouldn't let anyone down. If I didn't do this thing today, I let myself down. So I think that was a pressure I could deal with. I must say, I have a lot of friends who have been in very stressful jobs when their kids were very little. And so where the control was out of their hand, when you constantly feel like you're letting someone down or you're not meeting someone's expectations, that I personally could have not handled with little kids. But I was so I mean, I don't believe in it's either or. With me, I was able to do it. I was able to build businesses and have kids. And I honestly, we talked about this earlier before people were here. I was present a lot. I was there with my kids time-wise, like it was kids and work. I wasn't necessarily present, but I was there. So I'm proud of like how I showed up in terms of just, I would make them a priority, but I also made sure that I could build the things I wanted to build. And because what I'm trying to say is that when you start your own things, I could do it when they were in bed. I could do it at 4 a.m, right?
Yeah.
So, but I do wonder how people do it that are in high pressure jobs and try to get both done. And again, where it's out of their control, the deadlines and whatever. So I have a lot of empathy for people who make those 2 tracks work.
Yeah. Um, do you have a sense of what is to come? Like, let me share like a sort of a personal thing, which is like the last year, we had our second son, we moved into a house, cave day became my job. And it feels like I'm entering a phase where like this is what I'm working on for the next, hopefully 5 or 10 years, that I don't need new things. I'm sort of maintaining and working on my family and my house and my business. It externally, it feels like you know, started a new, start Tattly, and you have an idea for a to-do list app. So you're going to make that, and that becomes a business. Do you know what comes next? Are you in sort of a maintenance mode, or are you in open to new ideas mode?
No, I'm in a shedding mode.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Like looking for buyers mode.
Yes, I just want, I mean, again, this goes to your question of the good things that the pandemic has brought. I don't know if anyone had the same experience, but I used to be a complete workaholic. I used to define myself through my hustle. And I don't know where that went, but it's gone.
Yeah.
I feel like my tolerance and desire for just going for a walk in the park and just and working just way more like in a calmer and more inspired way, and not in a, like, I used to think if I didn't fall into bed at night after 14 years of 14 hours of working and totally exhausted, that I didn't give it my all.
Mm.
Where the heck did that come from? And I'm so glad. I feel like society is shifting out of it. I mean, I have
Yeah.
a lot of my friends who were all like that, and we're like, what happened? We can't
Do you-
even imagine living like that anymore.
Yeah, I think we're all having, I'm not going to say a similar experience, but I think we're having a version, a lot of us are having versions of that where, if you raised your hand before, you're learning something about the prioritization that came out of the pandemic. What you're saying sort of hints at something that I'm gathering from your projects and your businesses, which is that there's a you call it like resonance, but resonance with the energy you bring and you put out in the world, that the effect that one person can have on other people, that you're like, when you say, hey, you want to go for a walk today, you want to not work, take the afternoon off, like can hey, everyone in the office, can we just not talk about work and just check in how we're doing? Like that takes one person to affect a whole group of people. And I think things like creative mornings and things like the kind of community that you're just building on your own in Brooklyn with the people around you. I'm curious your perspective on what one person can do to change, not the world, but like to change their world, to say, hey, we're working too hard, or whatever it is.
No, I think we all have huge impact. And again, this goes, I'm a bit woo. I don't know if anyone's woo on this call, but I'm a big believer that if the more you're lit up, the more you're like vibing high, the more you're in a happy place, it's like energy you emanate, and actually it's freaking contagious with other people. And I think the more we would teach our children just to make sure that they're in a really good place, that we're, to take care of emotionally, energetically.
Yeah.
There's these teachings that have really changed my life when I was going through a really hard time, a personal life change when I separated from my wonderful ex-husband. And they're the teaching of Abraham Hicks, and they basically teach you to at all times pay attention to how you feel, and to always make your priority. And it sounds really selfish. When I first started listening to them, it was going against my but I should serve everyone else kind of thinking. But I started doing this, and I started really paying attention to whenever my energy would tank, be it an email that came in or a conversation that was like kind of derailing me, or someone's energy. And I really started just paying attention to what would bring it back up. And at the time when I was going through this, I realized if I start puttering with my plants, I had a lot of plants in the office. I just had to start puttering with my plants for a few minutes, and that just made me just back into neutral zone. Or I would go and sit with Ginger, the dog, on the couch and just pet Ginger for a while and just be with Ginger. I will walk around the block. It was like, it can be very simple things that just bring you back into just a neutral and happy place. And I swear to God, my life changed. I was ruthless about it. And you add a bit of a meditation on top of it. And it's something that I tell my kids all the time. Like, I ask them all the time, after an experience or after, let's say when they had a friend over, I always ask them, or after they watch certain YouTube channels, how does this make you feel? Is this filling you up, or is it depleting you? How is it? Just pay attention how something makes you feel. And I tell you, that lens, my children are so good at it now. To, like, my son the other day, you know, and granted, like, it's really hard to navigate as a parent who is addicted to its phone, to teach a kid, like, just to find that balance. But my son at least has started really pruning what he consumes on TikTok or whatever. He would say to me, he's like, Mom, this channel does not make me feel good, so I'm going to unsubscribe. And to me, that's winning. That's like, he's paying attention to his emotional state and how stuff that he's taking in is either feeding him in a positive way or in a negative way.
Yeah, that's huge. It's actually a topic that we'll be talking about on Tuesdays. We lead a workshop in this series. On Tuesday, we're leading self-knowledge, which is all about sort of understanding yourself. I think there's a lot to be learned there. I'm curious, you know, you mentioned just sort of briefly that you're a phone addict. I think there's a lot of people in our community that feel the same thing. Are you just, you're on step 1 of the 12 steps? You've admitted you have a problem, and, and that's where you're at?
I think I'm a few steps in. I think I've gotten much better than I used to be, but nowhere near. I just also think it is just also a part of who we are at this point. I've learned to not beat myself up, and almost like I'm reminding myself of how much good I get out of this. When I get the screen time report, sometimes I have to take a moment, like, wait. And then I realized that I listen to a ton of YouTube stuff where I'm like, oh, wait, no, I'm not on the screen. I'm listening to things that are nourishing me. So it's like almost a bit of a reframe of like, yeah, that's a lot of time, but a lot of it is spent with listening to meditation music or to really beautiful speeches, or I don't know. I stopped fighting it because it is giving me, I mean, just to give you an example, I had a hard time dropping into my meditations over, like, sort of in the middle of the pandemic. It used to be the thing I needed every day. So some people say they need running, you know, they can't be without running. I wish that would happen to me. It has never happened to me, but I had that with meditation, and I needed it. Getting up, would sit down, and then the pandemic, everything was just so stressful that I think I lost sort of my centeredness around it, and I couldn't do it anymore. And then I started beating myself up, and then I said, no, that's not going to help. And then I said, okay, what is another thing I could do that is making me feel also better, you know? And so I was like challenging myself to curate my Instagram stories algorithm to only feed me really upbeat stories. And you know, when you train it, it's like, yes, like, don't like, whatever. Man, if I could bottle up my Instagram stories algorithm, if I could sell it, it'd be so great. So many people have, because I started sharing all these positive, all these stories that make you feel good. Either they're like just in the heart news stories, or they're just super cute dogs, or whatever. Just whatever I could just sense, like, they make me happy if I watch them, and I would share them. And to the point where if I skip the day, I will get these DMs like addicts, literally saying, I wake up in the morning and I need my fix with your happy stories. So I became like the happiness curator for other people, which is really cute, because all it was like I couldn't meditate anymore. So I just found another way.
I think that, I mean, all of that to me comes back to the Abraham Hicks, like being aware of your own emotions and finding the things that fill you up and saying, how do I actually feel about that? And I'm going to unsubscribe, and I'm going to look for more of this. And I think that's super interesting. We have a quick question. The plan was not to take questions from the chat here, but I do think while we're on the topic, some of your favorite YouTube channels, are anything come to mind?
Well, I listen to an Abraham Hicks every single day. So if you just search for Abraham Hicks, like I listen to at least one clip every day. Oh my God, there's Kyle Cease that I just recently got into. I really like him. And then I watched some random ones with my daughter, like outdoorsy nature van people, like just to escape a little bit. People that just live in a van on the, I wouldn't know, I forget the name. Okay.
Well, if you think of them, you can email or we can talk about it later. So I'm going to go sort of a different direction here. We talk a little bit about Cave Day helping to improve your relationship to work. So let's pretend I'm your couples therapist and it's you, and sitting next to you is work. How do you guys get along?
Oh, I love my work.
Yeah.
I love my work.
It doesn't seem like it's abusive. It's not dysfunctional. You get along great. You communicate well.
No, I love my work. That's so funny. What a funny analogy is that? I'm just trying to like think now, because like now I see multiple work humans on the couch. Like I almost feel like I've been married to multiple people right now.
I mean, it is a marriage. It's this, I mean, it comes from this idea from David White, the poet, who wrote about this idea of the three marriages. And one of our marriages is to our work or our vocation. Yeah. And you've been committed to Creative Mornings for, what is it, 12 years? 10 years?
But there's also Tatley sitting there and Friendswork here sitting there. Like there's of like a little, this
got a little family.
It's like, no, I mean, I must say, I do think I prioritize my work too much, which is one of the reasons my marriage ended. Not the only reason, but it was probably one of the reasons. And I am someone who like, but this sounds really horrible saying that it's one of the reasons why it ended, but I have to say that my work is so purpose driven and is such a personal extension of who I am that to me, I can't help but just lean into it, because I don't see it as work. It is an extension of me and my beliefs and my values. And I mean, just for example, Creative Mornings, like there's so much goodness that is catapulted into the world through what we do, that it's okay to work a lot. I don't know if this makes sense. Yeah,
I think I think maybe a lot of us are sort of envious of that idea that you are able to create something that feels like an extension of you. And I resonate with the idea of the struggle of trying to figure out like, okay, who am I and what does it mean to have an extension of myself? And let me make some art and try to say something. I don't know, like I think it feels like it comes out of a life that you've had of, knowing yourself and getting to know yourself and seeing the personal changes that you're going through and the identity shifts and how that can reflect a different business, a different extension of yourself, a different kind, version of yourself. So I think I get it. And I think it's an amazing thing that you've done.
Thank you.
So a lot of the people here look up to you as sort of a, career role model or some version of that title. I'm curious who you look up to.
Oh, I have so many people. One of the women that just inspires me to no end is Maggie Doyne. She started Blink Now. She adopted, I think it's over 53 orphans in Nepal and built a school for them. She's just the most remarkable. She just came out with a book. She's the most remarkable young woman I know. Just unreal. She's like, I'm a big believer in living my life with an open heart and very lovingly, and she is personified love. She's incredible. So if you don't know her, look her up, Maggie Doyne. Who else inspires me? There's so many. oh my God, this is so big. Vicky Saunders, she runs an organization called SheEO. She's in Canada. She's literally changing the world of funding for women entrepreneurs. It's an incredibly beautiful organization that has created a perpetual fund. Women can invest $1,100 into this fund that becomes a perpetual fund that then women entrepreneurs can pitch their ideas to get funded. But then the beautiful thing is, like, the people that paid into it vote on, and it's all women supporting women.
Wow.
And then the beautiful thing is, let's say if 3 of us got in and said there's a pool of, I don't know, 1 million, the 3 of us have to sit down and look at our business ideas and together figure out, you can't divide it up just equally. It has to make sense by how much the business actually needs to get, like, so you create community, and
Wow.
it's just beautiful. What she's building is remarkable, and just completely changing the world of funding for women and how women interact with each other and what gets funded. And I just love people who just break through the existing systems and just believe that there's a better way. And those people need to be supported and celebrated.
Yeah, that's great. I'm sure there's lots more. I know that I didn't prepare you for that question. That sort of just came out of talking. So you mentioned on your blog at the beginning of the year that this year was a year to start writing your book.
You really caught that, didn't you?
I did my homework. You want to talk a little bit about it? Do you want to come to more caves? I think
I really should do that. Yeah, it's funny. Like, it's, when, I don't know if anyone has had that, but when the universe keeps giving you these little nuggets of you should do a thing and you're just too scared and chicken shit to do it, and eventually it's like it's coming from all sides at you. And but it's interesting, like, because it's the publishing world. I feel for them. I think it's a really hard world to be in. So people like me with a large audience are like prime, like, let's ask her for a book. And I for years I've been asked if I want to do a book, and I would always sit there like, what kind of book? And they was always related to my blog because I had a big following. It was like, no, I don't want, my blog is my blog. I don't need to write a book about my blog. Yeah. But it was so funny, but it planted the seed that eventually I know I will be ready. And I think the moment is coming. And I think it has a lot to do with sort of, if you've ever watched any of my talks, I tend to tell the story of, when I tell stories, it's always these little stories, nuggets, things that, experiences in my life, or sort of the rules for my life that come out of it. And I think the book is going to be sort of some of my epiphanies in my life that apparently people really enjoy when I share them. So
yeah, I know that I have. I look at your the Do Talks. Is that what it was?
The Do lecture, yeah.
The Do lectures. That was a great one. I'm not surprised that that's what the area of the book is, but I was sort of hoping that it would refer back to the, a new kind of business book. When you said at the beginning you read all these business books and it wasn't what you were hoping for, that
well, that will be part of it. Sure. I mean, that's just part. Again, I feel like it's so funny. It's like the book will be just an extension of telling the story of how I'm living my life, because that's just the only thing I can do. I mean, yeah. It's so funny. In 2019, I remember being invited to, and I love giving talks. They terrify me, but they're just such a great way to like make me dig. It's like writing a mini book. It's just much shorter. Mm-hmm. I have the pressure to do it. But I was invited to speak at Oracle and at Google internally at these really big events. And I was like, that's amazing. Thank you so much. What do you want me to talk about? And they literally invited me to talk about my kind of leadership of like, and sort of my emphasis on fun and love and kindness. And I was like, oh my God, I grew up on the Swiss countrysides next to cows in a 2,000 people town. And now I'm being invited to Oracle and Google and tell them about like just running a kind of loving business. I mean, it's absurd. It's amazing. So my book will definitely be about that.
Sure, I'm sure. Um, did you read the book 4,000 Weeks or listen to it?
Oh my God, this is like, you're like literally about the 52nd person that told me.
Because I think you would love it. We did a book club with all the cave day staff because it was just like so powerful. But one of the ideas, I'm sure you've heard that it's about how we use our time and that. But one of the insights at the end is to sort of be deliberate about what you're doing.
Sorry, my cat just threw things down off my desk. Sorry. Deliberate what?
Be deliberate about what you are going to be bad at. You can't be amazing at everything. You can't spend time, having a six-pack and a great business and a great family and travel every week and all this stuff. So I like the phrasing of this question, which is like, what don't you do? But like you do everything. It seems like you do everything, but I'm curious if you are deliberate about the things you turn down.
Yes. And I actually have a fun story about this.
I'm sure.
Or a mini story. I remember when I was in the thick of starting all these businesses of like, kind of like not know, like there was just so much going on and I had to prioritize and figure out like, what do I do? What do I not do? And this friend of mine said, Tina, for a week, write down everything you do and rate it with a smiley face, frowny face, or sad face, or just like a neutral face, or
a little like Abraham Hicks, a little
that was way before. So I literally everything I had to do, was it like something regarding admin for the co-working space or something, like whatever it was, any task I had to do. And then after a week, I looked at all the frowny faces, the things I didn't like doing, and they were all highly admin stuff. Like stuff that I just don't thrive in. And then I hired a studio manager assistant to help me do that. And then my life was so much better. So I am officially, I laugh at myself, like at the co-working space, I currently do all the invoicing and stuff myself. And they have to hunt me down to pay because I'm just not good at it. So they were like, or I mess up the QuickBooks recurring invoicing and then they don't get it. And we're all laughing at it. Like I'm literally laughing with them how bad I am at this, but it's refreshing when you actually embrace it that you're really bad at it. So
I mean, it's sort of that self-awareness piece, right? It's like knowing what lights you up and what energizes you, or what. I want to be mindful of time and start to wrap up. I have two questions to wrap up. So if there's any questions that are coming from the group here, please feel free to put them in the chat. We'll see if we can get to one or two. The closing question is, any asks or offers for the community? Are you thinking about things? You have things that you want to ask us or offer the group?
I would love to know by a raise of hands who here has been to a Creative Mornings or a field trip. Oh my God, so many of you. Is it raise your hand if it was a field trip, a digital field trip, or if it was like, is it digital? Yes.
I think a lot of, I don't know if you remember this, Tina, but a lot of Cave Day was like the most, we've run the most virtual field trips out of anyone. We run one.
I know.
So a lot of our members come in through the field trips. So I'm guessing that a handful of people here found us.
We were your incubator, Jake.
You were. We're sharing community.
You're too smart. You make them pay you. We don't. Is anyone located here in New York? I think there's a few. Because if anyone of you is located in New York and you have connections to musicians that might want to perform at our events, that's currently top of mind for me. So reach out to me. I'm Swiss Miss on Twitter.
And you're back in person. You did one this month. How did that go?
Oh, it was amazing. It was, I must say though, I was a little bit like, how do I do an in-person event after, after 2 years? We had to literally learn how to translate what we were really good at IRL to a digital space. And of course, you can't do that just one-to-one. We had to sort of rethink of what is Creative Mornings in the digital wetland. And that was a huge lift. And then we got really good at that. And now we're back and like, wait, how we do this? Like
Right.
pouring real coffee? Like, what do I need to, like, the fact that we had to physically schlep things was like an epiphany to us, but it was amazing. And there were so many people in tears because they were so moved about being in community again. I feel very lucky that we're back.
That's wonderful. My last question is that we started today the conversation with how we usually start in the cave, right? What are you working on? What are you leaving out? And at the end of every cave, we also ask you to reflect on the last hour, right? The last cave, to share any wins, to comment on your own process, and that the cave is like a safe space to brag. I've learned that sometimes I get insights just by like talking out ideas. Maybe you do the same. I'm curious if this hour, anything has started to, any wins to record or report from the last hour, anything to share on your end?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's a win just to be in community, and I appreciate that. Even though I would have never wanted to do this before the pandemic, that I've started to appreciate something like this that's so easy to go to, you know, to attend and be in community. I think I just want to reflect on the fact that as someone who would have never embraced digital events, something like this, I have really started to appreciate what they are and what they make possible. And it's just so lovely that you all showed up, like made time for this. I will never take for granted when people make time to show up for something. It's really lovely.
Yeah, thanks. We do have one question here and then we'll wrap up, which is, I'll just read it. You spent years of your career hustling, and the pandemic has provided some clarity on the need to live more calmly. If you were early in your career, do you think slowing down would have been a good idea? How might you approach your pandemic realizations differently if you were younger? Or
that's a great question. Actually, I am amazed seeing my kids operate in the world, and my daughter especially. She is acting in such a calm and inspired way, the way she approaches what she needs to get done, and like in a calmness, and she gets it always done. And I, even at her age, when I was young, I was already in that frantic mode. I actually think you can get more done if you do it in a calm and very focused way. And I think
welcome to Cave Day.
Yep. Yep. That was just your commercial right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I actually almost wish I could go back and sort of see how would this pan out if I was a bit more, you know, on a conversation. So I would say, you know, my path is my path, and that's fine. And it's just really nice to see how we're evolving. I actually love looking back and going, oh, old Tina would have done this completely differently. But I think that's what life is all about, isn't it? Like we just evolve and reflect back to how we're changing and growing. I'm a big believer that we need to we should live an expansive life. Like I love the word expansive, to the point that it's my license plate. Yeah. So, and I feel like I'm proud of looking back and saying that was me back then, but I feel like there's an expansiveness to how I operate in the world now, and that makes me happy.
Well, Tina, thanks so much for joining us tonight. I don't take for granted that you even said yes, and that you showed up, and that you're here, and that you showed up as your full self. I assume it's so great to get to know you a little bit better.
What you do is amazing, Jake. Cave Day has changed a lot of people's lives, I know.
Yeah. So thanks for being here. If you're in the room, I'm sure you know, but if you want to learn more about Tina or follow her, it's Swiss Miss on Twitter and Instagram, swiss-miss.com, creativemornings.com. Tons of stuff. There's a lot of praise for you, Tina, in the chat. So hopefully you're reading those.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we're big fans. We appreciate your time. Thank you all for being here, and we'll see you in the cave soon. Tina, come write your book in the cave.
Oh, okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye.